Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to everyone to our series Inside the CX Suite. Today, we'll be hosting an executive conversation with Josh Ives, Senior Vice President of Customer Operations at FanDuel. Before we start today's webinar, here are our 3 housekeeping points. We've designed this session to be 25 minutes of interview and discussion format between Michael Lawder and Josh Ives. We'll leave 20 minutes to allow Josh to answer your questions live. Ask questions over the Q&A interface on your Zoom menu. We've anonymized the questions, so feel free to ask anything on your mind. With that, let me hand it over to Michael Lawder. After spending almost 25 years as Senior Vice President and Vice President of Customer Experience for companies like Apple, Samsung, and EA, Michael has joined ASAPP as Chief Experience Officer. He works directly with ASAPP customers to identify the ingredients they need to build best-in-class customer experience strategies so they can outpace competitors and delight customers. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Teresa, and good afternoon as well to everyone. It's great to be here. I hope everybody is being safe during this crazy time with the pandemic and fires and hurricanes. We hope everybody is being safe, and we're really excited to be here with you. Before we dive in, we wanted to share a little bit of background of our interviewee today, and a good colleague and friend of mine. And so we decided to put together a video, and we wanted to roll that first before we get started.
Possible that if you're listening to this, he's been responsible for your happiness as well. How do you deliver customer happiness? Josh has done it by creating some of the most innovative CX programs in the industry. While serving as a customer experience leader at EA, he kept 300 million gamers happy. That meant leading programs like EA's Great Game Guarantee, the first digital refund policy in the industry. Unhappy? Return your digital game for any reason. No questions asked. While serving as VP of Customer Experience at Samsung, part of his job was keeping the hundreds of millions of Americans who use Samsung devices happy. He led Samsung's Premium Care program, delivering a replacement for a damaged phone as soon as the next day. But keeping customers happy wasn't always easy. He was the CX leader at Samsung during the Galaxy Note 7 time period, communicating quickly and transparently with customers to regain trust and loyalty. While serving as SVP of Customer Experience and Care at Altice USA, Josh kept residents and businesses in 21 states happy with their cable TV, internet access, and telephone service. And today, he's the SVP of Customer Operations at FanDuel, a global fantasy sports provider. You can bet that he'll make sure that the millions of football, basketball, and baseball fans on FanDuel are happy and dominating their leagues. ASAPP is very proud to welcome Josh Ives as our guest today in our executive conversation series, Inside the CX Suite.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa, for that video. Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, so listen, we've known each other for a long time, and we're both longtime colleagues and buddies. And I thought it might be interesting to sort of take it back to the beginning. And I know you've done a lot in your career, even before you got on this journey with customer experience and customer service. Would love to hear a little bit about your past experiences and kind of how all of them shaped and informed your career in customer experience.
Yeah, sure. So probably the thing that I think most informed it in my early life was working at restaurants. So I worked at a barbecue restaurant, which still exists in Virginia Beach, called the Beach Bully. Kind of headed up their catering operation, and really anything that happens in the restaurant industry or hospitality industry, any kind of service industry like that, it really does come down to the customer experience. And assuming you put out a quality product, what keeps people coming back to a restaurant or a hotel is the experience they have while they're there. And so that really kind of formulated that for me. And then as I started into sort of my professional career, did all the technical stuff, worked for the Department of Defense for a while, doing computer networks as a software engineer at a startup, and eventually found myself consulting and helping out a couple of our customers. This company I was at, we did learning management systems and performance management, which included a lot of compliance training. And through that, one of my customers ended up in a bit of a reputational issue. I won't go into the specifics, but a lot of what we did to help reduce some of the fines they were facing from the SEC really also spoke to rebuilding trust with their customer base. Obviously, anytime a company has something that directly calls their ethics and practices into question, there's a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt there. And it just kind of struck me that a lot of the things that companies do on the back end really are a lot more about their reputation than they might think, and really feed into that. And to me, that's all part of the customer experience. Ultimately, customer experience to me is the perception that a customer has of your brand and how you make that real and how you continue and drive that perception.
Yeah, it's interesting because so many of us who've been in this business for a long time, have focused on customer service as a cost center, and many of the investments we do and the way we think has been more focused on how can we reduce the cost of labor, how can we reduce or contain contacts, and I think that sort of perspective of using customer experience as part of the way you market and brand your business, I think we all kind of understand conceptually, but it's sometimes hard to convince executives to do that, and hard to sort of make progress there. What is sort of a couple of lessons you've got in terms of how you start to shift the thinking from more of a cost center to leveraging CX to power your brand?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Some are sort of just kind of obvious observations that I've had and that seem to resonate. One is, I've had this conversation with a couple CMOs and marketing executives in my career, where there's this idea of, is customer service marketing or is it not? And I've always had the mindset that customer service, and really all your touch points, but especially customer service, are where the rubber meets the road in terms of realization of your brand. And marketing sort of sets this identity and this strategy for who your brand will be, and does all this great work convincing people of that, and interestingly spends millions or sometimes billions of dollars getting out in the market trying to have conversations with customers. Customer service, on the other hand, spends a lot of money as well having conversations with customers who are really trying to have conversations with the brand. And so that feels aligned and synergistic to me. And so, if you have a marketing department that's out there, working on experiential campaigns, ways to interact with customers, drive engagement, a big part of that is keeping in the back of their heads that on the other side of the house, you have customer service who's taking all these inbound, discussions and chats and calls, whatever it is, from customers trying to engage with your brand. So if you're not aligned and delivering a on-brand, sort of on-message voice to those customers that are coming in, reaching out to you, then the money you're spending on your marketing campaign is almost just a waste.
Totally. Yeah. And it's sort of, I'd be curious your take on how you build that kind of an organization. And let's just talk a little bit about culture. I mean, I think if you think about the last 30 years in the contact center space, most contact center businesses are built by hiring or outsourcing hundreds of people who probably don't know your brand and don't use your products or service, and then they're given a little bit of training and sort of release of the voice of their brand. And I'd be curious, how important you think, a corporate and a CX culture is, sort of a customer first focus is to building that, kind of workforce that actually has that connection and affinity to the brand that can be, brand ambassadors and advocates for your company. I know in your career you've worked at a few places where you've driven programs to improve that, but help us understand, like, how do you make that transition to a customer first culture and to a culture that's really cares about every conversation that it has?
Yeah. So, there's the fundamental, some baselining, which is you just go sort out how it ties to revenue, both in terms of protecting it and also in terms of building it. So, I won't name which place it is, but, we did a study on customers who, we baselined on customers who were spending money with us, but didn't reach out for support or service at all. That was sort of our baseline. And then we analyzed the customers who reached out for support, and, based on their survey information was, we didn't do a good job. I like the video, talks about the number of customers I've been responsible for making happy. I've probably been responsible for making a few unhappy in my career as well. Not everything goes perfectly, but we didn't do a good job, and their tendency was to spend in the neighborhood of 16 to 18% less over the next 6 months with us. Not surprising at all. What sort of woke everyone up and kind of shifted a view at this company was the customers that we did a good job taking care of. We solved their issue well. They were satisfied. Over the next 6 months, spent 28% more than the customers that didn't have a support contact at all. So that's a very tight measurement that shows, and it's easy to walk into a CFO's office and say, hey, look, this is the money that's on the table for the customers that we do a good job supporting versus the bad job versus not supporting at all. And, the other aspect of that I always look for is customers that reach out and contact you. Absolutely, you want to worry about them. You want to do a great job taking care of them. But they're a lens into probably a much larger percentage of your customer base that won't bother. And you've already blown the chance. So if you're not taking the inputs you get from those customers that reach out to you and tell you areas that you could have done better because they couldn't figure something out, they needed help, and pushing that back into your product or service, you're really missing opportunity, because a lot of that churn is coming from the customers that aren't going to take the time to reach out to you. A customer that reaches out for help is at least somewhat engaged already. The customer who doesn't is really where I think a lot of brands see revenue just walking out the door, because they're not leveraging the insights that they could be getting from their engaged customer base that is reaching out and asking for help.
Totally makes sense. Hey, I was thinking about when we were both at EA, Electronic Arts, one of the biggest video game publishers in the world, and we were sort of endeavoring on this adventure to figure out how to create, this, customer first culture. And this was a time when gaming was changing to more online and free to play, and sort of building those relationships and driving that engagement became increasingly more important. And I was reminded of one of the programs you created in Hero Academy. I know that a lot of people who are listening, are wondering, how do you go about, you had the data, and you sort of proved that, good customer experience is good business, but how do you internally, both at an executive level and more broadly, like what are some of the tactics, and maybe you can share some of what you did with what are some of the tactics you used to make that happen?
Yeah, so Hero Academy was great and is really, was designed to help educate the organization about what was really happening to the customer base. I think that's another, sort of missed opportunity that a lot of organizations struggle with is, if you're running an organization and you say you're customer first and customer focused, and look at almost every company in the world has that somewhere as a tagline, an internal value, whatever. But your executive team isn't regularly actually listening to customers who are using your products, using your services, reaching out. That's just really kind of paying lip service to, what feels like a good thing to say. And Hero Academy really was designed to do that. So, all the way up to the CEO, we had a program where people could come in, sit next to a customer service agent. A couple times we actually let a few of the guys try to support people themselves on the phone. that wasn't as good as we thought it would be. Turns out to be a harder job than a lot of people think. I mean, it was very entertaining for the agents and for us. Unfortunately, I think we had to reach out to those customers later and actually fix their issue. It really drove some deep understanding and helped build out at EA, into the culture, part of the DNA of, what could we do better for customers? And I remember, we had some people in our legal department and even our accounting department go through that and, really kind of highlight things like, man, I did not realize that in my job, some of these policies that I've made, which I really just wrote to kind of protect the company and kind of the obvious thing to do, but they had an impact on the customer experience because they drove us to have to say certain things to customers that were perceived as negative, even though they really weren't. And it was very eye-opening for individuals across the company to really kind of feel that hot seat of being on the hook with the customer, and sometimes having to deliver a message that's not great.
Yeah, I remember that distinctly, and I remember those people that, in some ways, it was like reminding everyone at the company that we were all there because of our customers, and like there's no better way to do that than putting the executives and the leaders and everyone across the company like next to a customer service agent and actually next to the voice of the customer, and that you kind of see these eyes light up and they sort of become advocates. And to your point, they start thinking about in their own world, every decision they're making now kind of goes through this new lens of, is this going to be good or bad for the customer? And I think that's when you and I started to see this cultural shift happen at the company. And I always tell people, it's like, if there's one thing you can do, get your executives to listen to calls or to review chat transcripts, because no executive is going to say no to that, right? I mean, that is your customer base. These are the people that buy your products. And I think it's pretty tough not to become an advocate for, the service and experience business when doing that.
And you see some really cool stuff come out of that as well. I mean, I remember having engineers sitting next to agents and just watching this engineer, as one of the live service engineers, listening on this customer call. And he was just like, oh no, I know exactly what's happening and I could probably fix it in 5 minutes. And I mean, he felt this pressure, which was good, went and fixed it. And then no customers had that issue again. And so some of the teams that engaged the most with that ended up sending engineers out to the call center for launches. And so they'd sit in the call center, hear something that was going on, go in a room and fix it, come back, listen to more calls. And it really helped smooth out launches and drive decisions differently.
It's so powerful. Listen, it is sometimes painful and difficult to listen to calls, but I have never listened to a call or been with people listening to calls where I didn't learn something and where there wasn't an opportunity. And I think any way, anyone listening can figure out how to get your CEO and your leadership team to listen to calls on a regular basis, make it part of your culture, I think is really powerful. Hey, we're going to shift a little bit to a little bit more operational focus. I did want to remind folks, if they have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You're welcome to ask any questions. There's already a ton of questions coming in. I wanted to touch a little bit, Josh, on something that's sort of near and dear to both of our hearts, which is this idea of investing in a lot of technology to try and, I'll use this sort of bad word, but deflect or contain the customer. I think the spirit of that is good, which is to empower customers to help themselves. But I'd be curious on your take of how some of these technology investments, whether it's automated IVR experiences or chatbots or some of these new sort of automation capabilities. What's your read on that in terms of a lever for reducing costs, and how do you think they should be used to improve the experience?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, anytime you give a customer an opportunity to solve something for themselves, it's fabulous, and you should do that. I hate the word deflection. You probably remember me chasing people around saying, "Don't call it that."
Yeah.
To me, it's you're resolving the customer online. You're helping them. The point is not to sort of stiff arm the customer and keep them out of your call center. It's more to get them a resolution in a faster and simpler way. First and foremost, it should be for them. The fact that it also saves you money is kind of a benefit. But if a customer really wants to talk to you, don't you want to take that conversation? Because again, that's an opportunity. And sort of like what I mentioned earlier, measuring and understanding what that opportunity actually is in real business terms is important and can go a long way. Some businesses it's easier to do that than others. But yeah, I'm always bullish in online and automated ways to feed information to customers, self-help tools, et cetera. There's lots of things customers want to do that they don't want to talk to you for. I don't ever want to talk to a customer service agent if I need to change a password. That's just lunacy. That's a super simple example, but that's the kind of thing, that should be easy to solve. And when someone does end up talking to a customer service agent about something like that, if your agents are really doing a good job, they should not just solve the problem for them, but also kind of teach them to fish down the road. So they can use some of those tools themselves.
That makes total sense. And sort of playing off of that a little bit, the traditional modern contact center has existed for, a little over 30 years. And most large companies that are not digitally native, are mostly talking and engaging with customers, at least in an assisted way with other people, over the telephone. And it kind of makes me laugh because, I read a study the other day that said, text messaging became the most common form of communication in the United States 12 years ago. But the vast majority of these businesses are engaging with customers on this kind of analog, asynchronous, old technology. And I'll kind of couple that with COVID and what's happening with all of us being at home and working remotely and having conversations like this one, not over a telephone but over digital channels. How do you see? I know in your new role at FanDuel, FanDuel is a digitally native, very very sort of digital first company. But I know you've also worked at companies where that's not been the case. So how do you think about the world of digital and asynchronous, and what's the right way to sort of tackle that as a strategy?
Yeah, so I think of it as, first and foremost, I like to give the customers the options for the channels that make sense to them, and adapt to that, and including how you manage asynchronous discussions. So things like messaging, Apple Business Chat, Google Business Messages, text message, those by nature are sort of kind of lean back, and when the customer gets at it, they get at it type channels. And so if you have a customer who is getting back to you in 15 minutes, between messages, that's fine. You can match that. But if they're going quick, you need to be fast like that, versus kind of traditional web chat where the customer is sitting there kind of staring at a screen. You've got to be on that. It feels like an eternity if, they send you something and they're sitting at their desk staring at a computer waiting for a response, and they just don't see that, So when you can move a customer to a medium that they're more comfortable with, a longer sort of spaced out interaction, that's great. And it's often more convenient for the customer. I like using SMS type communications because I can send my message, put my phone in my pocket, set it on the counter, go do what I'm doing, wait till I hear it, go back and pick it up. And the wait time doesn't feel intrusive to me as the customer. On the other hand, something urgent that I want to solve right away, or something that's, incredibly important to me, like, a healthcare provider or something, you tend to want to be more live and feel more real time with that. And so voice starts to make sense. So I think you have to weigh your industry and weigh your brand and who you are, but you also don't want to train your customers to go to voice, and then think you're going to shift them to digital. So if you're acquiring most of your customers by making outbound calls to them or knocking on their door, or driving them physically to a store all the time, you should expect that that's how they're going to interact with you once they are a customer and they need help. I mean, that's just you've taught them that's how you act as a brand. So transitioning those customers to digital after you've acquired them is much harder.
Yeah, it makes sense. We have a saying at ASAPP. It's customers never wait, agents always busy. And I think the beauty of that is if you need to ask a question and you can't stay tethered, the asynchronous communication is a fantastic tool. And if you need something more urgently, you need to design the operation so that, you're always responding to customers and they're never waiting on you. And I love the persistence and the ability to talk to companies and big brands in the same place that I talk to my friends and family. But it does kind of change the way you manage, the operation. And I think especially with COVID, I always say, like, never underestimate the power of a crisis. I think with COVID, you definitely have this new normal that I think for the first time, digital transformation, which has been something people have been talking about for a long time, I think we're really starting to see that accelerate. 300 million people are using Zoom every day. Several hundred million other people are using Microsoft Teams and WebEx, et cetera. And so I do think, and I love your take on this, I do feel like we might, for the first time, start to see, while we still hopefully are offering customers choice, that more and more customers are going to be comfortable engaging with brands, in places other than the telephone. I mean, what do you think that's true, or is it sort of wait and see? Or
no, I definitely think it's true. We've seen that shift at FanDuel, and I've seen it to varying degrees at other companies as well. I think one of the challenges is a lot of brands sort of self-fulfill their own prophecies around this stuff. If I won't name the company, but I started at a company that had 2 VPs running call centers, and huge operation around how to make the call center more efficient and deliver experiences through the call center. And yet we talked a lot about digital transformation, how we're going to move 50% of the volume over to digital channels. And, we had like a couple of people in a closet kind of working on our digital channels, and, just highlighted. So if half of our volume is supposed to go here, and we've got this operation over here that's massive to deal with, the volume here, how do we expect to achieve that if we don't put equivalent level focus? Now, you don't need the bodies because, it's not one-to-one, but you definitely need equivalent, if not better, focus, because you're building. A lot of companies aren't there yet. And, so you have to be willing to kind of invest in resources and time, and in technology if you expect to see those returns. You can't kind of just go, oh, let's go get a digital vendor and it's all going to work miraculously tomorrow. The customers will move.
do you think that's why most companies, assisted support interactions are 80 or 90% voice? Certainly the Fortune, 500, it seems like, for all the talk of omni-channel and digital transformation, and this is where our customers are, and millennials are the biggest customer, all these things. Do you think that it's just the level of commitment and focus on the company side, or are there other, sort of macro or micro drivers that are preventing a business to go from 90% voice to 50% voice, or some other, more balanced mix between channels? Is it just the focus internally, you think, or?
I think a lot of it's focus internally. That's probably half the problem. And then the other half is, service organizations in general aren't great at sort of marketing themselves to the customer. So, if you create these channels, if you don't promote them and celebrate them, that was one of the things that Samsung was actually really great at. When we did things in the care organization at Samsung, we had a CMO who was a great partner with us, and absolutely, would go talk about it publicly, and really made care a component of our brand,
Right.
Which helped us move customers to places we wanted to move them to. It worked well. And I think, if part of your brand is truly going to be like at FanDuel, we say we want to be absurdly fan focused. That's part of who we are, part of who we're working to be. And look, it's an ongoing effort. The great thing about that is your customers can always expect more. So you always have the next thing to work on. And you'll always find things that you can do better. But, being able to go out and publicly state to your customer base, hey, we're doing this thing for you, is really powerful. And it really kind of forces you to live up to those expectations in a way that's different if they're just, sort of written on a slide somewhere so everybody can feel good about it.
That's a great point. And I mean, I think that was a really special relationship between the CX and marketing organizations. I mean, I think marketing leaders certainly understand the power of great customer experience. I think, seeing that and experiencing that with you at Samsung was so unique in that, the marketing organization really believed that it was like a core part of the strategy and a core part of the brand value proposition. So that was awesome. I think really, really important as we move forward. And I know one of the things you believe strongly in. Hey, I got one more kind of fun question. We're going to throw it over to Q&A. And folks, if you have questions, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom there and feel free to ask. There are a ton of questions already. So I got one more question, then we'll move it to Q&A. So one of the fun things that we get to do as practitioners of customer experiences, we get to have like we all do, we get to have personal experiences in our own lives, and then think about how those things translate into our business life. And I'd love to hear maybe one experience that you've had that you just loved and that kind of exemplified what we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is one from a while ago, and it was actually shortly after I joined EA. So background was that, I'd been consulting before I joined EA for years and traveled a lot. So, had all my statuses everywhere and had always used Hertz for car rental. And I was very used to that, had the status, you walk up, your name's above the car that they're giving you whatever. And It's very easy, you drive away. And I was really disappointed the first trip I took with EA and they're like, oh no, we use National Rent-A-Car. And, that I was, you gotta be kidding me. I don't have any, I'm nobody to these guys. And I think I even might have called them and said, hey, will you match this status or whatever? And they didn't do that. So I was even more unhappy about that. So I show up at SFO and I go to get my car and I knew there was some deal where you just kind of picked out a car and then you drove through or whatever, however it worked. And I remembered it was the Green car rental company. But what I did is I went to the Enterprise. I just got in a car and I went to drive out and I pulled up and the guy's like, I just don't have any information about you renting a car. And so now I'm even more annoyed and I pull up my phone and I start going through and I'm like, crap. The one constant in life is yet again proven true. I'm an idiot. And I said, no, it's National. I did the wrong thing here. I guess I got to go back. And he said, no, actually, not many people know this, but we're part of the same company. Give me your National reservation. So I give it to him. And he canceled the National reservation, gave me an Enterprise reservation, and I just drove, and the cost was all the same. He figured it all out. And I left that experience thinking this company's maybe not so horrible. And I don't know how many people I've told that story to, but it's been a lot. And I was really impressed with it. And that's not the kind of thing that's written in a policy somewhere, most likely.
Right.
Because it doesn't happen that often. I find ways to do things like that don't happen that often. But that employee clearly took ownership of the brand and wanted to make a decent experience, even though, he didn't mess up. They didn't do anything wrong. But he took a problem that I had created and just made a solution out of it. And so to me, that's the perfect embodiment of delivering great experiences. Yeah. And he was empowered to do it, right? That was the other thing is the company may not have had a procedure that told him how to do that, but they also didn't have anything that would get in his way, which was fantastic.
And I mean, we all know that every time we've ever made one of those mistakes, 99 times out of 100, we're sent away to the other company, instead of the representative taking ownership and being empowered, like you said, to take care of it. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's move to so we got a ton of questions. We're not going to get to them all. We'll try to answer the questions we don't get to offline, but we appreciate all the questions. I'm going to start with a technology question. I know you and I are both fans of using technology to innovate the customer experience, but not overusing it or using it the wrong way. And the big buzzword these days is AI, or sometimes you'll hear people say AI and machine learning. And if you ask a lot of people, what does that mean? They'll say something about robots or something. But how do you? I mean, everyone's chasing after this dream of we can replace all the humans with machines. And let's start with customer service. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but how should what's your guidance to all of the CX leaders in terms of how do you use AI or explore AI to improve the customer experience?
Yeah, so I'm generally pretty bullish on AI, and that doesn't always mean chatbots. Like I think a lot of companies fall into this trap of like the chatbot's a magic bullet, and there's varying degrees of success you can have there. The more complicated your business, the harder it is to be successful with that. And I think some of the players in the space haven't done as good a job as they could, sort of sharing knowledge across companies. I've been in discussions with sort of AI or chatbot vendors, and they've said things like, yeah, you just got to train it the way that your customers say yes or no. And I'm like, well, haven't you done that 100 times? Like, why do I have to do that? What do I need you for? I get it if it's about my company, my industry, but I don't like, how many ways can someone say yes? That seems like a thing that an AI vendor ought to do. So I think you have a little bit of that, and that's just, once or twice I ran into simple things like that. But I really am bullish on AI as an agent assisting tool.
Yeah.
Kind of monitoring conversations, popping information up to the agent that they can quickly select and share with the customer. And then that also has the benefit of training the AI with a human who knows in a more scalable way than, locking a bunch of people in a closet and trying to with. You've got this huge workforce talking to customers all the time. Why not leverage it to help educate your AI, which can also help them?
Yeah.
I think that's big. And then,
It makes sense. I was at a conference when we still went to conferences last year, and a guy that ran CX for it was a truck company, but it was a big truck company. We had this roundtable
big
about
trucks are a big company.
Big truck company.
Like the trucks were big.
The trucks were big and the company was big. So my point is, like, he was probably a truck driver at some point. Like, he wasn't a technologist. And he pulled me aside after this roundtable we had about AI, and he said, "Can I get rid of all my agents now?" And I said, "No." The world of Star Trek is not here. We can't just talk to a computer and say anything we want and get the exact answer we want. So I think this idea of assisting humans, to make them better and to make them better faster it feels to me like where the technology is now, the right focus, and certainly that's kind of how ASAPP thinks about creating better agents versus trying to automate the conversation away. Especially to your point earlier, which is you can have conversations with customers and actually increase their lifetime value, add value to the business. It's not always a cost center. So I think that makes total sense. Here's another interesting question, which I think we've all felt at some point in our careers. How do you recommend we stop our contact center teams from having "it's not our fault, it's a problem with the company" for whatever product attitude? How do you get them to take ownership? We're trying to change the culture so that everyone feels a connection and is an advocate to our brand.
Yeah, so I think the first, sort of response I would give to that is do they have ownership of the brand? Can they actually provide input, and will it be heard, and will it be acted on?
Right.
So when I see problems like that, and it's super common. Lots of companies, have those types of challenges. Usually what you find is, for whatever reason, the employee base that tends to lean that way feels disenfranchised in some capacity. They don't feel listened to. They don't feel like, they can, actually make changes. So I tend to want to go into the mode of, how do we ensure that we're hearing these things that the front line is hearing every day from our customers? To me, that they're really kind of like the rock stars.
Right.
My job is to make those guys be able to put on a good show for our customer.
Yeah.
And, so I guess I'm kind of a glorified roadie in that sense. But they have to be able to feel like they can provide input. And when they start to feel that way, then they can start to feel ownership of the brand. The other thing is, do you know who you are as a brand? And I don't mean, oh, we're a bank. We want to help people with, their financial needs. That's what you are. But who are you? Being able to define that really resonates with an employee base a lot differently than, I work for a bank, or I work for whatever. I work here, and this is who we are as a brand. This is what we stand for. That's much more relatable for the agent, and is much more ownable for them to sort of drive interaction around. And so if you can't answer that who are you question, and I really do mean who, there's no way the agent can, and they certainly can't feel ownership for that. And then, the other bit of it is thinking about who your staff is. I was recently at a company, and someone mentioned to me, well, I don't let our agents reply directly to our CEO or COO, because that they're agents. I don't really want them talking to leaders directly, because who knows what they'll say. And my response to that was, well, why the hell do you want to talk to your customers then?
Yeah.
I mean, at least we're all on the same team here.
Right.
And if you don't trust someone who's on the front line of your customer staff to not say something crazy to an executive at the company, then you really shouldn't be trusting them to talk to your customers.
It totally makes sense. And I think it's, how do you hire those people and build that culture so that you have, back to the voice of the brand, what more powerful platform do you have than engaging your customers one-on-one than in the contact center? Which kind of leads me to the last question. Time has flown by, but I love this question, and it's kind of related, and I know you're really passionate about this, but the question is, you mentioned making the most of the interactions with your engaged customers, those that reach out to you. How do you encourage more of your customers to engage rather than not reaching out, and get them to share insights with you? How do you make it easier for customers to be heard? And maybe I'll just add to that, not just reactively, but how do you both listen to all of your customers, not just those that are calling or contacting you, but then what's your thoughts kind of on sort of doing that proactively as well?
Yeah. So, I think it's a good question, and the interactions that you have inform you of patterns to go look for in behaviors that your customers are exhibiting. So if someone calls you up and says, hey, I was trying to, I'll just use FanDuel as an example. Someone calls us up and says, or chats us and says, I'm trying to deposit into, my wallet so I can go, bet on this game, whatever, and I can't get it to work. Well, once we help that customer and look at that, we should be able to use that data and work to use that data to go identify other customers that look like they're having the same problem. And sort of the ultimate of that is to realize that problem when it's happening and pop up proactively and say, hey, do you need help? It looks like you're trying to do this. Here's some things you can do to resolve that. Whether it's with a human or the video or FAQ, there's a bunch of ways to do that. And I find I'm going to kind of dual answer something here, because I saw a question about partnering with a UX team. UX researchers love to do surveys and things like that, and they live in sort of, hey, this is what the customer told us they would do. And in customer service and CX, we live in the world of what the customer did do, which is a pretty powerful insight. I'm not saying you shouldn't go do research and survey customers about what they want, things like that, but you got to marry that with their actual behavior. and using behavior and activities that customers follow and actually do in your app, your service, really is much more informative and can be used to be proactive and make those customers feel good. I mean, when you I think Netflix does this when they detect that something broke a stream and you get an email that says, looks like this broke, we're doing this, you feel like they actually, kind of have their shit together, and it feels good to do business with them. And a lot more companies can do that than think they can.
Yeah, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to send you that email and actually give you a refund of your monthly subscription fee based on the amount of time they anticipated you were having issues streaming content, which I think is a great example of proactivity. Hey, man, listen, it's great to see you, and I really appreciate you doing this. It's fun to chat as always, and I'm reminiscing about our 10 plus years working together, and wish you the best of luck in your new role at FanDuel. And with that, we'll hand it over to Teresa for final thoughts.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Josh. We talked a little bit today about artificial intelligence and digital channels. If you would like to see how Fortune 500 companies are using AI and digital channels to drive engagement and lower OpEx costs so that you can benchmark yourselves, feel free to email us at ask@asap.com, and we'd be happy to show you what else is happening in an industry. With that, I will say thank you to everyone and have a great afternoon and have a great day.